Wildcats, this is Mrs. Forrest. I want to give you a trick so that bump becomes easier. The hardest thing on bump, I think, is the number lines. So now that you're very familiar with fraction strips, we're going to use everything you know about fraction strips on number lines. And it's a trick that will help you look at it differently and be able to visualize on number lines all the different fractions. So if you remember, last week I showed you bump and I want you to play it. The directions are something that I printed out and I put on the back of my actual game board. But if you look them up on last week's calendar, that's fine too. You take 2 dice, just as a reminder, you roll them, add them together. The sum of these 2 dice, 2 dots and 1 dot, the sum is 3. So then I look at the key and this corresponding fraction is 1/2. So I have to find 1/2 on the game board, and mine's similar to yours. It's not the exact same, but I'm playing the exact same you would. So I find 1/2, and then I get to put my counter on it, or my marker, whatever I use. Then if I'm playing with somebody else and they roll next and they get 1/2, they get to bump me off of 1/2 and they put their marker on it. The exception to that is if you roll 1/2 again and your marker has been placed on it and your partner did not bump you off yet, you can put a second counter on it and that locks it in so that nobody can bump you off. So if you roll the same fraction twice, you get locked in and you can put another counter on top of that one. The hint I want to give you is for number lines. So if you look at every one of these number lines on here and on your game board, you're going to see they're all between 0 and 1. Number lines can be lower than 0, fewer than 0, negative numbers, and we haven't learned that yet, so we're not going there. Or it can be way beyond the whole number of 1. The number lines we've used in the past are 1, 2, 3, 4, and they go pretty high. So up into the hundreds and thousands. Well, we're learning fractions, so everything this time is going to be between 0 and 1. You can look at the number line labels. They have 0 and 1 labeled. And then they have a whole bunch of marks. Just like your fraction strips have a line and then a whole bunch of marks, that is exactly the same setup as your number line. So when you look at fraction strips, I want you to also imagine that it's a number line between 0, so that's no fifth, I have it lined up under fifths, and 1, so that would be 5/5. The denominator down, the bottom number is the denominator, and it's going to be how much this whole line, 0 to 1, is our whole, is divided up into. How many equal pieces will it be divided into? So I put it under fifths, so we could divide this line into 5 equal parts. In order to do that, we need to put 4 lines on it because this last one counts as a line and it's already there. So then we'll have 5 equal spots. Well, if we have to find 3/5 on a number line, it's just like on our fraction strips, counting over 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, and it would be right here. So use your fraction strips at the end of each section. So at the end of the first 1/5, that is where it would be marked on a number line. You can do that with 4ths, 6ths, every number on your fraction strip. You can then put your number line right up against that and divide the whole into the denominator, equal number of pieces, and then count out, just like you would on a fraction strip, the numerator, how many are you going to use? And wherever the end of that number is, you could mark it on your number line. So if you look at the number line on the bump fractions game, count how many pieces between 0 and 1 there are. How many equal sized pieces are between 0 and 1? That's your denominator. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not counting the lines. If you count the lines, you'll be wrong every time. It's how many equally sized sections there are. So the whole section, just like on our fraction strips, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal sections. And now, at the end of the first, the second, the third section is the dot. 3/5 will be our fraction. If there are 5 equal pieces between 0 and 1, if there are 5 equal parts between 0 and 1, we know that's the denominator. And then the dot is at the third one over. That's going to be our numerator. So that could help you with fractions bump, identifying fractions on a number line.